Guess what? Today marks the day that I reached my 50th state, having visited South Carolina for the first time. Most of them I got by bicycle, but others just giving talks, and I thought I'd never been to North Dakota until I saw the sign, the little map down at Mount Rushmore today that showed Fargo is in North Dakota, and I've been to Fargo, not just seen the movie, I've actually been to the place, you betcha, and anyway, so that's kind of nice. Thank you for the warm welcome and for coming out. I really appreciate that. Tonight I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about Skeptic and what we do and some of the topics we cover and what this is all about. Skeptic is the quarterly publication of the Skeptic Society. We're a 501c3 nonprofit science education organization devoted to investigating claims of the paranormal, pseudoscience, fringe groups, and cults and claims of all kinds between good science, junk science, bad science, voodoo science, pathological science, non-science, and plain old nonsense. Operators are standing by to take your subscription order. Every issue of Skeptic has a particular theme to it. We did one, for example, on the future of intelligence. Are people getting smarter or dumber? Well, I'm from Los Angeles, so I have an opinion about this myself. But in fact, it turns out people are getting smarter. IQ scores are going up about 3 points every 10 years, as we discussed in my talk this morning for the psych department there, called the Flynn effect. For whatever reason, on abstract reasoning, we're getting smarter as a species. And so this is good, so you young students can get out there and solve problems about Alzheimer's and cancer before we hit the wall. I'm counting on this. So we did one on the future of artificial intelligence. When will computers achieve human-level intelligence? And our cover story there, we concluded that we're 5 years away and always will be. It turns out this is a really hard problem to solve. For example, when Watson won Jeopardy and beat Ken Jennings, the greatest Jeopardy champion of all time, does he know that he won? Did Watson think, this is awesome, I beat Ken Jen, yeah! And I asked Ferrucci, the IBM guy who built Watson, I met him at the Singularity Institute at a dinner party thing. These are the people that think we're going to hit the singularity in 2030. We're going to achieve all this immortality and so forth. He said, yes, Watson knows that he won. I said, how does he know? He goes, I programmed him and told him he won. I said, okay, no, I mean consciously self-aware of what's going on. Well, it's hard to say because we don't even know how we are self-aware, and I've met some people who I'm pretty sure are not self-aware in Los Angeles. Anyway, so we've done a number of issues on cults. Is Scientology a cult? If they're not a cult, then who is a cult? What does it mean to be a cult? 9/11, was 9/11 an inside job? Was this a conspiracy theory? Yes, 9/11 was a conspiracy theory. Turns out 19 members of Al-Qaeda plotting to fly planes into buildings without telling us ahead of time constitutes a conspiracy. By definition, conspiracies really do exist. The question is, which ones are the real ones, which ones are not, and that's the kind of thing we tackle. We did one on Bernie Madoff. That's the eponymous Bernie Madoff. I'm sorry, that's the eponymous, what's his name? I'm blanking out. The Ponzi, that's Charles Ponzi, at the time that the Bernie Madoff scam happened. So the question is, why would anybody fall for that? Because clearly Bernie Madoff's clients were not uneducated, ignorant, unintelligent people. They were quite the opposite, in fact. So clearly this has nothing to do with intelligence. Which gets at the question that I try to answer tonight, why do people believe weird things, or even more, why do smart people believe weird things? And the answer is because we have to believe things, and smart people are better at rationalizing things they believe for non-smart reasons, which is most of what we believe. Not for rational reasons, but for emotional, psychological reasons, and so on. We've done a lot on climate change. This is kind of a good example of what we mean by being a skeptic. Are you a global warming skeptic, or are you skeptical of the global warming skeptics? Which would make you a believer, whatever that would mean in science, because it's not like science is a belief system exactly like religion or politics or something like that. Either the earth is getting warmer or it's not. Either it's human caused or it's not. In principle, we should be able to answer the question with data, and yet it never seems like it's quite that simple. So it's not that skepticism is just a position you take ahead of time. I just don't believe anything. Clearly, we believe lots of things depending on the evidence, and every case is different. You might be a global warming skeptic, maybe you're a creationist skeptic, or if you're an evolution skeptic, then you're a creationist, something like that. So it depends on the particular claim, so I'm going to rifle through a bunch of these different ones. We also have Junior Skeptic, tucked into the back of every issue of Skeptic magazine for kids. It's actually kind of for young adults. There's a big young adult book market, and secretly people tell me this is their favorite part of the magazine. You know, we have Scooby-Doo. You know, Scooby-Doo is a great skeptic. You know, every episode of Scooby-Doo, they always solve the mystery. It's always, you know, the crazy guy down the street with the mask on, or, you know, it's this person or it's that. You know, there's some natural explanation, which is what we're trying to do in Skeptic, trying to find natural explanations for things. So you can join the Skeptic, subscribe to, this is our latest issue, cons. How does it work? How do con games work? And who's most likely to fall for con games, which is all of us, but some more than others, and so on. And you get to meet the skeptical dog if you join the Skeptic Society. He looks really skeptical. So what we're doing here is skepticism really is just science. And in science and skepticism, we search for natural explanations for natural phenomena. And we ask the question, what's more likely? That aliens traversed the vast distances of interstellar space and landed in Farmer Bob's field in Pucker Brush, Kansas, and made a crop circle that says skeptic.com? Or that somebody just made the slide for me as a way to plug our webpage. Another way to say it is, before we say something is out of this world, let's first make sure that it's not in this world. Again, what's more likely? That aliens traversed the vast distances of interstellar space and landed in Sacramento, California to help the governor? I'm from California. That was my governor for 8 years. Oh boy. Woo-hoo. Or that the World Weekly News just makes stuff up. Okay, we have no evidence of aliens landing anywhere. We have lots of evidence of tabloid magazines making things up. So this is Hume's, David Hume's, the great Enlightenment Scottish philosopher who wrote a book on thinking, knowledge, and so forth. In his chapter on miracles, he asked, what's more likely? That the laws of nature were temporarily suspended to explain this one thing, or that people misperceive, exaggerate, misunderstand things, or just make stuff up? And he answered in the latter. So science requires that we test a claim to see if it's true. So let's take, for example, the Gopher golf ball finder. This is a device that we are told is capable of finding golf balls. Here it is. This is what it looks like. The Gopher golf ball finder. It is a piece of plastic with like a radio little antenna that and a little swivel that goes like that. So when I met the guy that brought this to our office to test to see if it really works, he was a dentist in the Valley, Southern California. A dentist. He went to medical school. And I said, well, where are you finding golf balls? He says, well, at the country club. It's like, really? At a country club? Imagine that. There's like golf balls all over yeah. He says, so I just sort of point it, and I go in that direction, and eventually I'll find a golf ball. I said, yeah, I'm sure you do. I'm quite sure that is true. And so this thing actually was being sold for $100. It's a piece of plastic and it's just a cheap antenna. And so I'll show you how it works. So you basically just sort of go down. Well, so after the golf ball thing, the guy that made this for the Quadro Corporation, he started selling it to find other things. Now the way we're told that it works is there is a piece of the substance you want to find in the chip here. So it's like sympathetic magic. The vibrations of the stuff in here go out, and like seeks and finds like. And so the golf ball finds the golf ball. Or if you put a piece of marijuana in there, a little THC, and you take it to the local high school, and you walk down the hallway with the lockers on either side, and it just sort of starts doing this or this. And if you go down and you open enough lockers, guess what you're likely to find by chance? All right, so this was being sold for $999 to high school principals. Because you can't just randomly open students' lockers, you have to have a probable cause to investigate. So this was their probable cause. So you just sort of go down, and it just kind of, it either swivels left or it, swivels right like this. Now, I think it has a right-leaning bias, so we'll just kind of try it this way. And no, it seems to kind of go, hang on here for a second. This is science, don't laugh. So, there's something really weird going on here. I mean, the chances of somebody in this audience having a golf ball are pretty low. It's like the psychics. I'm getting something in this area here. Hang on. could be you, could be you, could be, hang on. What are the, you don't have a golf ball by any chance, do you?
Maybe.
You do? What? Oh my God, wait, oh come on. Oh come on, look at that. What are the chances? We've never met before, have we? All right, if that's not bad enough, okay, so this is super easy to test. You just have to have 2 boxes, opaque boxes, a golf ball in one. The guy leaves the room, you set it up. I set it up, or somebody else sets it up, so I don't know when I'm running the experiment for him, so there's no bias there. You know, how many, if he run it 50 times, how many does he have to get right? Of course, he's going to get 25 out of 50 by chance. That's called guessing. How many more than 25 and less than 50 do you have to get right to be significant at the 95% confidence level? And the answer is 37. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot. It's like 25 by guessing, 26, 27. I bet you can get that. Yeah, sure, you're going to get 20, 19, 27, 28. But by the time you get to like 20 and 30, 19, 31, 18, 32, and so on around the bell curve, it's going to become more and more improbable. So that's how you test these things. Unfortunately, nobody tested this thing a few years ago when the Quadro golf ball finder was reconfigured as a bomb detection device. This thing was being sold for tens of thousands of dollars to militaries and governments, particularly in the Middle East, worried about terrorist attacks, where they would run this little thing by cars that would go by at checkpoints to see if they had a bomb or not. All right, now it's no longer funny. Now there's lives at stake. And I'll give you the story here. The guy that was selling this is now in jail.
Court claimed his bomb detectors could trace explosives hidden underground, underwater, and even through walls. The businessman sold them to governments, to armies, to border agencies, all while knowing they didn't work. But his kit so convinced all of his buyers that he made tens of millions of pounds, and in the process put the lives of hundreds of civilians and soldiers at risk. Well, today he was convicted of fraud, as our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davies reports.
There are people there, certainly when you're dealing with drugs, who don't want this equipment to succeed. Here is Jim McCormick in full flow on a sales trip to India. A man who, with his genial style and easy patter, clearly enjoys holding court. This equipment and the dog work perfectly hand in hand. Today at the Old Bailey, however, the spell was well and truly broken, as the 57-year-old former policeman saw his hugely lucrative life on the road playing the role of global protector, exposed for the gobsmacking scam that it was. His promos had all the contrived drama of a B-movie trailer. His security products, it turns out, all the credibility of the stunts used to sell them. This was the man who brought the world devices such as the ABE 651. No batteries, no electricity, in reality, no use whatsoever. And yet, all over the world, there were generals, police chiefs, even UN officials lining up to buy them.
James McCormick is a conman. He's been maintaining this front for over 10 years now and fooling many, many people into believing this device could save lives. It couldn't, and it doesn't.
For how many years have you been?
I've been making this unit. The initial unit was made in 1997. Originally from Liverpool, McCormick served briefly with Merseyside Police. He then began selling radio equipment. The offences relate to a 5-year period beginning in 2007. Very different looking version of what you got here. Of all McCormick's useless products, this was the most advanced. Neatly packed in a sturdy case, plastic cards would be placed in a pouch cabled to the detector. Capable through nuclear quadrupole resonance, he boasted, of tracing EBP, explosive black powder, GEU, Euros, NCC, cocaine, humans, ivory, all detectable by this, even from aircraft 3 miles away. And what was all this technology based upon? A novelty golf ball finder called the Gopher. This is the product, would you believe, which underpinned Jim McCormick's multi-million-pound security empire. A bit of plastic with a retractable aerial on a spindle. For the golfer it adds whimsically who has everything. For his first detection device, the AD-100, McCormick just bought the gopher and swapped the sticker. Here he is, out in the field, in his element, this time Niger. And here is a soldier hunting for explosives with a modified version of the gopher. This detection device is completely ineffectual, said experts called by the prosecution. One would describe McCormick's following attempts to explain the technology as just an incomprehensible jumble of disconnected sentences.
A pure passive receiver. So that simple process board is operating in frequencies below SSB, below HF.
And yet he sold these devices all over the world. To the police in Belgium, to UN peacekeepers in Lebanon, until they wised up, to security forces in China, Japan, Kenya, Libya, and Mexico, among many others, and to Iran, his most profitable market. In this most volatile of security environments, it's thought he sold 6,000 units, where hapless security personnel almost comically pounded their feet up and down, conned into thinking their own electrostatic energy was powering the units. But month after month, the carnage continued.
There are no working parts in that device. It is empty. McCormick, for 10 years, has sold this device in countries that are racked with terrorism. He has paid no heed to the people who stood on checkpoints believing this device worked. And you can see a number.
So, boy, I mean, people ask, what's the harm of people believing silly nonsense? Well, there's your answer. I mean, it works by what's called the ideomotor response. That is, your thoughts, your ideas, cause your muscles to make certain movements. It's almost impossible to hold it steady. So, of course, just by chance, micro motions of your hands, it's going to start moving. This is the explanation for the Ouija board. You're subconsciously moving the planchette around the Ouija. How many have played the Ouija board? I love the Ouija board. It's great fun. Because I swear I'm not moving it. My partner swears they're not moving it. Who's moving it? Must be the spirits. You know. Well, we just make these unconscious motions, and that's just normal. So running an experiment is really what it's all about. You don't have to have a billion-dollar particle accelerator. You can run a simple experiment like I just described for testing the golf ball finder, or the one that my friend Emily Rosa tested on something called therapeutic touch. Therapeutic touch is the belief, it was quite popular in the 90s and it's still around. It's based on this sort of ancient Eastern traditions that we have an energy field in our body. This is where the idea of chakras comes from. You know, you have your crown chakra and your throat chakra and your heart chakra and your solar plexus chakra and a couple others I forget now. And so the energy sort of flows like this, but it also extends beyond your skin. So you can detect somebody who has some illnesses or disease or problem by running your hands above their body to detect the human energy field. So it looks something like this. She's in a hospital room here, this therapeutic touch practitioner, running her hands about 2 or 3 inches above the patient's body. We call it the touchy-feely without the touchy. I mean, massage is great, feels great. There's, clinically proven it lowers blood pressure, reduces stress. It's great. You don't even get that with this. You don't even get touched. Anyway, so a friend of mine named Linda Rosa from Boulder, Colorado, who was a nurse, became alarmed that there were hospital rooms with therapeutic touch practitioners in there doing the non-touchy massagey of patients in there with the anesthesiologist and the surgeons and so on. And so by chance, one day she was watching a video of one of these practitioners when her 4th grade daughter, Emily, had to do a science project. You remember the 4th grade science project? You had to make a little widget or machine or volcano or something like that. So Emily thought, I wonder if I can test therapeutic touch. So she devised a technique. Not does it heal, because people get better for all sorts of reasons we don't understand. Maybe it's the medication, maybe it's the diet, maybe it's lifestyle, maybe it's sleep, maybe it's who knows, randomness. And so whatever the thing you did last before you got better gets the credit. This is how homeopathy works, by the way. It doesn't do anything. And so if you get better, then that gets the credit, and it doesn't do any harm, so that's how it works. What Emily wanted to know was just, can they detect her energy field if they can't see it? How do you do that? So she put herself behind this cardboard, opaque cardboard, and the practitioner puts their hands through there, and then she holds her hand above one hand or the other, like that. So she tested 21 of these practitioners with a range of experience from 1 to 21 years. She always made sure her hand was the same level above their hand, and she did it slowly so they wouldn't feel like air going over it, that kind of thing. And she always tested them ahead of time, before we start the experiment. Can you feel my energy field? Oh yes, it's prepubescent pink and it's radiating, and they would go on and on like this, and they would detect it 100% of the time. Put them behind the cardboard box. They got, in the 280 trials, they got 123 hits, 157 misses. They did worse than guessing. And back to the problem of people not thinking critically, they thought they did pretty well. Well, I got almost half. Right. But that's not good when you're just guessing. So anyway, we published Emily's results in Skeptic to no great fanfare because our readers are pretty skeptical of this anyway. But then she collected more data, and with her mom, who's a nurse, and her stepfather, who's a mathematician, they published it in the Journal of the American Medical Association, where Emily was featured on national television as the youngest person ever published in a major scientific journal. She was 11 at the time. You don't need a billion-dollar particle accelerator. You just need to know how to ask very simple questions. I'll show you one of these clips from Emily's appearances and how she ran her experiment. It's quite dramatic. This is from John Scott.
What's being done right now in mainstream American hospitals. It's called Therapeutic Touch, and it's practiced in hundreds of medical centers, even during surgery. In Connecticut, Nurse Ann Miner does Therapeutic Touch on Lisa Brackett to help treat her leukemia.
What is heat coming from your heart center? Do you feel like you can do it?
The nurse supposedly feels, without touching, from 3 or 4 inches away, feels the defective energy pouring out.
I can feel where the energy is balanced and where it's not balanced. I can feel where it's intense. I can feel it's depleted.
Then she says she channels the healing energy of the universe through her hands to you. There's no scientific proof that this works, but the patient says that doesn't matter.
I don't need explanations because I have faith in the process. That's a really wonderful thing when you feel helpless, terrified, when you're given a diagnosis, like I was.
It's hard to argue with satisfied patients. But 2 years ago, a 9-year-old girl in Colorado thought that for her 4th grade science project, she'd put Therapeutic Touch to the test.
Today I'm going to test you on how well you can feel the human energy field.
Emily Rose's test was simple. She asked practitioners of Therapeutic Touch to feel the energy from her hand. But first, she had to put their hand through a towel and a piece of cardboard so they couldn't see where her hand was. She didn't ask them to heal anything. She just asked the most basic question.
Tell me which of your hands you think my hand is over.
Left.
Again and again, touch therapists failed the test.
Left.
Amazingly, they kept volunteering to take the test. And even when they failed to do better at picking the correct hand than they would have done flipping a coin,
Right.
their faith and their skills was not dimmed. This woman guessed right only 3 times out of 10.
How do you think the test went?
I think it went very well.
Okay, you got 1 right. Sorry.
No, really. I'm so glad you got 4 out of 10 where they thought you'd pass. And obviously they didn't know their statistics.
We asked more than a dozen Therapeutic Touch specialists to come here and take your test, and not one would. Does that surprise you?
No.
Why is it?
Lots of people think that I scared them really good.
Well, not that good. Though Emily's test got publicity, it was published in the prestigious Journal of the American Medical Association. Since then, Therapeutic Touch is practiced more than ever.
So I should note that, again, she was not testing if people get better. Again, people get better for all sorts of reasons. And we do need to understand why people go to things like that, because they're looking for something. And when you're given a diagnosis like that, it is depressing. And of course, that's the temptation. the siren song of alternative medicine, but there's no such thing as alternative medicine. There's just science-based medicine and everything else that hasn't been tested. Or as they like to say, you know what you call medicine, alternative medicine that has evidence? Medicine. I just wrote my latest Scientific American column on Charlie Sheen's cure of HIV. He's not cured of HIV, but he went to Mexico to see this Dr. Sam Chichua, who I noticed because I never heard of him, but he appeared on Bill Maher's show in January. 4 million viewers of real time saw this guy say he could cure AIDS. Wow, that would be spectacular. Why haven't we heard of this guy? All right, this is a Nobel Prize, right? Okay. Anyway, so I just debunked all that stuff, but it's understandable why people would want to do this, right? Even though in the case of HIV, it's no longer a death sentence, so that's something. That's the true miracle of medicine, that we can actually make progress like that. All right, so that's an extraordinary claim, and as Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So you need to scale up the quality and quantity of your evidence with the spectacular nature of your claim. As my other favorite quote from Philip K. Dick, reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. Of course, beliefs affect how we interpret the science, but at some point, there really is a reality. And it doesn't matter what you think about it, it's really there. And everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts, is another nice way to say it. Yeah, free speech, of course, it's great. But you can't just make stuff up. Some people do make stuff up. So I elevated my friend, the late, great Christopher Hitchens' quote to a dictum in Scientific American. What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. It sounds better with a British accent and a glass of whiskey on the podium, but I can't function like that anyway. And in that case, the burden of proof is on the person making the claim, not on the skeptic. You say, well, I think Bigfoot's real. That's nice. Show me the body. Well, can you prove that there isn't? No. I don't have to prove that there isn't a Bigfoot. You're the one making the claim. I'm just saying, that's fantastic. Show me. I'd love to see it. Aliens are here. Great. Where are they? Oh, they're invisible lizards living underground in New Mexico. Oh, really? Okay. So Carl Sagan makes this great little story in his book, Demon Haunted World. It's a terrific book, which you should read right after you read The Believing Brain. No, anyway. In which he says, it's sort of a thought experiment. I have a dragon in my garage. Really? That's so cool. Can I see it? Yeah, come here, I'll show you. Lift up the garage door, he goes, check it out. Well, I see some paint cans and a ladder, and I don't see a dragon. Oh, well, it's an invisible dragon. Oh, an invisible dragon. Okay. Well, I know. We'll put some powder on the ground, and we'll get his footprints. You see, this dragon floats above the ground about a foot. It's very lightweight. Well, I have here some infrared equipment. We can film the heat coming off the dragon. Well, you see, this is the cold dragon. He's cold-blooded, and he doesn't give off any heat at all. Well, how about the fire, the dragon fire? No, this is special cold fire that can't be detected. Okay, what's the difference between an indetectable, invisible, hovering dragon and no dragon at all? Okay, at some point, you have to come into contact with reality and give us some evidence. Otherwise, it's reasonable to put the burden of proof on the claimant and say, otherwise, I'm skeptical until you prove otherwise. And when the facts change, you should change your mind. That's okay. That's what we do. What do you do? Another one of my favorite quotes. I've changed my mind on a bunch of things. I used to be a creationist. Now I'm an evolutionist. I used to be against gun control. Now I'm in favor of some gun control. And I used to be hardcore libertarian. Now I'm less hardcore. I changed my mind. It just depends on the particular claim. You have to just sort of look at the facts as they come. And one of my other favorite stories comes from Isaac Asimov, the great science fiction writer who wrote a beautiful essay called The Relativity of Wrong. When people thought the Earth was flat, they were wrong. When people thought the Earth was spherical, they were wrong. The Earth is an oblate spheroid. It's fatter on the equator, slightly heavier and flatter on the bottom than the top. It's not a perfect sphere. But if you think that thinking the Earth is spherical is just as wrong as thinking the Earth is flat, then your view is wronger than both of them put together. There are degrees of wrongness. as my friend Richard Dawkins likes to say, when two opposite points of view are expressed with equal intensity, the truth does not necessarily lie exactly halfway between them. It's possible for one side to be simply wrong. So if you think the Earth is 10,000 years old and I think the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, the truth is not add them up and divide by 2. One of them is just wrong, and we know which one side that is. Now, it's not always that clear, but when it is, it's okay to just call it out. You're wrong. All right. And when we do that, that's what science does in its self-correcting nature. This is my friend Simon Singh. He's a particle physicist, cosmologist in England, turned science writer. So, like me, he's always looking for ways to talk about how science works using pop culture examples, like Charlie Sheen and Bill Maher, whatever. And so he came across a fine example that he used in an op-ed piece in The Guardian, based on a popular song at the time a few years ago by a popular singer named Katie Malau. And it's a love song called 9 Million Bicycles. There are 9 million bicycles in Beijing. That's a fact. It's a thing we can't deny, like the fact that I will love you till I die. And then she writes or sings. So Simon wrote this op-ed piece saying, now wait a minute. Okay, 12 billion light years from the edge. Okay, first of all, it's not 12 billion, it's 13.7 billion. And astronomers have been working day and especially night to get that number. And it's not a guess. You know, it's an estimate based on data with, you know, well-defined error bars. It's between this and so forth. And there is no edge to the universe. You know, the universe is expanding into it is its own space and time. It's not expand. There's no edge. So in fact, it wouldn't even be, if we were in the dead center, it wouldn't even be 13.7 billion. It's not the radii. It would be, you know, 26 something, and then it's actually more than that because the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate and so on. I'm told by cosmologist friends that it's more like 40 billion, 46 billion light years, but that's neither here nor there. So he publishes this op-ed piece saying, you know, I love Katie Malau and she's great, but, you know, this is how science really works. Much to his surprise, he heard from Katie, who said, oh, I feel kind of embarrassed because I was in the astronomy club in high school and I really wanted to get it right. So they went back and cut a new version. Here's in the radio station. Here's the original version. So here's the scientifically correct love song. You see, science doesn't take anything away from love. Like, you know what you call love without evidence? Stalking. That's a Tim Minchin joke I stole. If you don't know Tim Minchin, be sure and look him up. He's very funny. All right, so let's return to this question. This is one of these what's more likely questions. Are aliens coming to Earth and are UFOs their spacecraft? Well, what's more likely? That they come from other worlds or from this world? Well, here's a UFO. This is a photograph of a UFO taken from my front yard in Altadena, California. And there it is. There's my bush out there in the front. Here it is, you know, sort of hovering above. That's downtown Los Angeles there. Here it is, you know, just like there's downtown LA. That's Pasadena there. Now, if that's starting to look a lot like a hubcap, hang on. Here it is taking off the rockets going there. Here's another one hovering above the San Gabriel Mountains in my backyard. Anyway, this was all for a photo shoot that we did for National Geographic on how to fake your own UFO photographs. So this is my daughter with the camera crew, and I've got a piece of glass here that I'm holding, another technique in addition to flipping hubcaps. The hubcap thing is really quite terrific. You just have to find a place that's sort of above things with a cityscape in the background. You just have somebody off to the side flipping things like this. You just take pictures with you focus on infinity and you get sort of this blurry thing going by. It's beautiful. This one you can do with, you just take a piece of glass and some coins, like a quarter and 2 nickels, really works nice. Put some double-sided tape or just take some Scotch tape and fold it and stick it on there. And you put it in a triangular formation because for some reason the aliens fly in triangular formations. We're not sure why. But when you focus on infinity, it makes a nice shot. Hovering over, the aliens are invading Los Angeles. Oh boy. Okay, now this doesn't mean that every UFO photograph is faked by someone like me. But the fact that you can't tell the difference, and if you look at the old ones from the 50s and 60s, they look not much better than what we, actually in some of them, much worse. And you know how we know the UFOs are not visiting Earth? Because in the last 10 years, the number of cell phones with high quality, high def cameras would have captured more and more, but in fact the number of sightings is going down. Okay, so, and you can apply that principle to Bigfoot, and Loch Ness Monster and so forth. So UFO, what does it mean? It just means unidentified. And unidentified does not mean extraterrestrial, it just means I don't know. What was it? I don't know. And that's okay. It's okay to say, I don't know, and just leave it at that. Now, most of us don't like to do that, but in science, that's what we do. We just say, I don't know. And I don't know doesn't mean your pet theory is right. Oh, Shermer can't explain it. Must be my pet theory is right. No, it doesn't mean anything. It just means he doesn't know, you don't know, maybe nobody knows. Maybe one of you will figure it out. Or graduate students, that's what they're for. I don't know, it just means it's unknown and nothing more. But of course, we want to believe. That's the iconic poster from X-Files that we love so much. And so that's what I want to talk about for the remaining of the talk. The basis of my book, The Believing Brain, is the belief engine. That is, our brains are designed to find patterns and connect the dots. That's why I call us pattern-seeking primates. A appears to be connected to B, and that's called association learning. As you all know, Pavlov's dog, you ring the bell, give him some food, he salivates. You ring the bell, give him some food, he salivates. You ring the bell, he salivates. In the case of my dog, I have a chocolate lab named Hitch, after the great Christopher Hitchens. And so he's got me all figured out, and he's got me well trained. He knows exactly what to do to get his food. He rings the bell, I come running. And it's not much different than that, actually. Or Skinner's box, you stick the rat in there. I used to do this. And he doesn't know he's supposed to press the bar, but he's hungry because you haven't fed him in a while. You starve him to 23% below their normal weight or whatever. So they're you can't do this with undergraduates. You have to use term paper choices and things like that to get them to participate. But so you throw him in there, and every time he starts to move toward the bar, you click it, and it makes a little clicking noise. So he associates the click with, he's going to get fed. And so that's a simple association. A is connected to B. We'll press lever for food. If you want to know what this looked like when I did this research, this is a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. This was one of our computers of a professor I worked for. This was a Texas Instrument programmable calculator. This was really cutting edge. It was very exciting. And most of us had a lot more hair back then. And some of you won't know, some of you younger people won't know, but these are what we used to call pencils. And this is paper. You can see them in museums now. And this is one of my pigeons that we trained to peck these 2 different keys and give them a reward. And if they peck the left key, if they peck the left key, they got a double reinforcement compared to the right key, so they peck the left key twice as often as the right key. That's neither here nor there. But if you stick them in there untrained and you reinforce them randomly, then whatever they were doing just before they got reinforced, maybe they go around like this because they're hungry and active, and they bump the wall with their left wing, they get reinforced, they're likely to repeat that again, very definition of a reinforcement. Anything causes the organism to repeat the behavior, so that's called magical thinking, superstition, as Skinner called it. And it's not just a product of being a bird brain. If you go to Las Vegas, on the way to Los Angeles from here, you can see non-bird brains sitting there pulling the slot machines and thinking they found the pattern that isn't really there. So I call this process patternicity. It's a noun, the tendency to find meaningful patterns in both meaningful and meaningless noise, in which we make 2 primary thinking errors, a type 1 error, false positive, thinking a pattern is real when it isn't. That is, you think A is connected to B, but it's really not. It just looks like it. Or a type 2 error, false negative, is not believing a pattern is real when it is. And so our thought experiment for the night is imagine you're a hominid on the plains of Africa and you hear rustle in the grass. Is it a dangerous predator or is it just the wind? Well, if you think the rustle in the grass is a dangerous predator, it turns out it's just the wind. You've made a type 1 error. But that's a low-cost error. It's a false positive. I thought it was real, but it wasn't. And you've all seen on the fur, fin, and feather shows that the animals are just super hypersensitive, and they, particularly prey animals, and they scurry off at the snap of a twig. On the other hand, if you believe that the rustle in the grass is just the wind, and it turns out it's a dangerous predator, you're lunch. Congratulations, you've just been given a Darwin Award for taking yourself out of the gene pool early before reproducing. Thank you. I saw one of these YouTube videos the other day when I was searching cat videos, and there was a guy that made an electric guitar. For some reason, a handmade electric guitar. For some reason he thought, well, you just hook up the 2 wires out of the plug into the 2 cables on the 2 wires for it, boom, the thing, down he goes. Okay. So here's the formula for this. That is, patternicities occur whenever the cost of making a type 1 error is less than the cost of making a type 2 error. The problem is that assessing the difference between these is highly problematic, especially in split-second life and death situations. So the default position is just to assume all patterns are real. That is, assume all rustles of the grass are dangerous predators and not just the wind. In other words, the moment you grasp something, you make a connection, the assumption is it's real. And I read it on the interweb. It must be true. So the moment you make a connection, it must be real. It's another cognitive step to say, well, I doubt it. Or maybe it's not true. Or maybe I should ask for the facts. Or maybe I should withhold judgment. So that requires you understand it and you challenge it. Okay, so that's cognitively, it's a heavier cognitive load, takes more time, it's unpleasant, it's uncomfortable. So I'm arguing there's a natural selection for the cognitive process of assuming that all patterns are real and that all patternicities represent real and important phenomena. So I'm not just saying it's an error in thinking, it's just part of our thinking. People don't believe weird things because they're uneducated, unread, ignorant, whatever. It's all of us find patterns that may or may not be real. And we're the descendants of those most successful patternicity primates. Just think about climate change. Is it real or is it not? Let's look at the data. Is the pattern really there or is the pattern not there? That's a harder problem than the rustle in the grass, but it's the same process. We want to know, and that's what science does best. That's what we don't do very well without some method. So there are some examples of patterns that aren't really there, but they look like they're there. What's that look like? A horse. And there's maybe a horse or dog or something. How about here? Does that help? You see the cow? Oh, come on, I thought it would be much better here. How about this one, the classic, you see the Dalmatian dog? Now, by putting the red line around the cow or the dog, I'm priming your brain. I'm telling you, this is what you're supposed to see. This is why all magicians say, this is what I'm going to do. They're priming you. They're telling you, this is what I want you to see, even though you're not going to see what he's really doing. How about here? What do you see? Saturn. How about here? Okay, that's good because there's nothing there. But if you think you saw something and you're afraid to say, see me afterwards because it's a sign of brain damage. No, just kidding. These 2 images actually were part of an experiment conducted by a woman named Jennifer Whitson at UT Austin in their business department, just studying how anxiety or levels of uncertainty fuel superstitious thinking, conspiratorial thinking. That is, if you prime subjects to feel uncomfortable or anxious or uncertain, out of control, they're more likely to see illusory images in something like that compared to something like that. So that's the idea that superstitions are particularly related to things, patternicities and superstitions, when related to control. There's many other variables. But the more control you have of a situation, the less superstitious ritual behaviors you need. Think about baseball. Baseball hitters are very superstitious. Baseball fielders, fielders are very successful. If you don't know baseball, most pros, 90 to 95% successful in the field. The best fail 7 out of 10 times at the plate. You can make the Hall of Fame and be a 7 out of 10 failure. So the batters are very superstitious, the fielders not so superstitious. It's the same people. It's not like football where you have 2 different sets of teams, offense and defense. It's the same people. So it's the situation that drives people to find more patterns. And these priming effects is where you prime the brain to hear and see it, and it will obey, leads us to see that beliefs affect how we perceive things. That is, concepts affect and influence our percepts. And my favorite example of this is, for those of you who've seen my TED Talk, I've seen this already, but it's very amusing. This is their whole web page is dedicated to backward speech, backward songs. This is a big thing when I was in high school. You play records backwards. Back in the day, we had these record players, and you could put the little thing between 33 and 45 and manually go backwards like that and put the needle on there, and you could listen to what the Beatles were really telling us. Oh, Paul is dead. Oh, no. But this is the best one of all, Stairway to Heaven, that these rockers were embedding these hidden, secret, satanic messages to corrupt our mind. Mind you, this is during the era of The Exorcist, and there's all these satanic movies and songs and things like that. But I'm just using this as an example of Patternicity. So I'm going to play for you a portion of the song forward with the words, and then that same portion backwards without the words on the screen. So I'm not going to prime you, just tell you what you're hearing. You just see if you can hear the secret satanic messages. Then I'll play it a third time backwards with the words on the screen. You'll hear every word. Okay, so here we go forward. Oh. Okay. Okay, there's some things you should not be skeptical of. This is the greatest rock song of all time. Right before Freebird. Okay, thank you. All right, here it is. And frankly, I don't even know what it means forward, but when I was in high school, it was deeply meaningful. Remember seeing that documentary where some guy broke into John Lennon's house? And so instead of calling the police and panicking, he just sat the guy down and started talking to him. And he's like, I really want to know what it meant when you said, the walrus was Paul. He said, nothing. It just rhymed and we made it up. What? But, sometimes they just make stuff up. Okay. All right, here it is backwards without the words on the screen. So you're going to listen for the secret satanic messages. Here we go. All right, what'd you get? Satan, of course, that's pretty clear. Anything else? 666, yeah. All right, now you will hear every word with the prime on the screen. Oh man, you don't want to go anywhere near that tool shed. It's a very, very scary place. Bad things happen in the tool shed. Some patterns pop out more quickly to us because we're evolved to see faces. You recognize, of course, immediately our president. But if you stare at these in detail for a few seconds, you'll see one of them is a little bit off, a little bit weird. Which one looks a little off? The one on the left, yep, here it is. I'll rotate it around. The one on the left is now on the right. His mouth and eyes are flipped upside down. And I'll show you what's going on here. This effect was first discovered by Peter Thompson with pictures of Maggie Thatcher, which is even scarier than... So what's going on here is that in a little area in your temporal lobes, just above your ears here, is a little area called the fusiform gyrus. This is where your facial recognition software is, the neural networks that are associated with seeing people's faces. People with damage to this area of their brain have face blindness. They can't see, they don't recognize other people's faces. Sometimes they don't recognize themselves in the mirror. So there's two pathways there, one that fires very rapidly and just scans a face. Just 2 eyes and a mouth, boom, that's all I need, that's a face. Then the details come in a few microseconds later, eyes, ears, mouth, looking for the cheeks, is there recognition, is there not, and so forth. And so that's why after a few seconds you reckon, wait a minute, something. So when you're doing a double take, like, have we met before? I think we met before. I'm scanning the model in my memory of, so forth, or is this somebody new? Okay, that's what, so deja vu experiences, ooh, it feels like I've been in this town before. There's a gas station and a restaurant, and so basically there's a match going on. Have I been here before? Have I been to Fargo? Something like that. And so basically there's only so many variations on towns in America. They all kind of look the same, variations a little bit here and there. And so there's a feeling, that deja vu feeling. I feel like I've been here before. It's just a close trigger to the memory you already have of someplace you really have been. This one's coming close to that. Faces are quite popular. The reason faces are important to us in an evolutionary sense is we read other people's emotions. We determine trust, likability, attraction. And so based on people's eyes, their skin, the close-up texture of their skin, and so forth. Faces are vitally important. And that's why we see them, like the famous face on Mars, which the ufologists got very excited about after the Viking spacecraft mission photographed this. And for decades, they hounded NASA and JPL with a letter writing campaign. We want you to take a close-up photo because we can see the Martians are signaling us. So they did. Here it is. Now, if you squint, you can kind of see the face pop back out. There's the 2 eyes, the nose, the mouth. It's just a rotor mountain, of course, but by squinting, you're reducing the granularity of the data to coarse grain, getting your fusiform gyrus to trigger and go, face, I see a face. Like here's the happy face on Mars, right there. Beep. Here's the Indian Head Valley. It's actually a valley. This is in Canada. I think it's fairly close to due north from here. You can see the road, you can Google it. There's a road going, there's a few miles across. Quite striking. Here's a bunch of others. I collect these. There's actually now a website dedicated to this. Oh no! Ah! Doesn't take much. This one's quite striking, these shadows on the side of the garage door. Here's the alien head. It's a cute little puppy. Oh. It's Edvard Munch's The Scream. The nun bun, another one of my favorites, discovered by a Tennessee baker in 1996. And for a while he was selling, I have one of his t-shirts, he sent me one. He's selling these t-shirts until he got a cease and desist letter from Mother Teresa. Charity only goes so far if you're making money on, okay. Here's Our Lady of the Chicago Underpass. Just a water stain, but people got very excited about this, and very religious people and not so religious people. Satan loves you, oh yeah. Here's Jesus appears on the side of a cow trailer in Gonzales, Texas. The arms up and the head. Some people saw something significant in the bonfire. Pope John Paul. This is kind of a cool one. This is a mosquito shadow, which it looks a little bit like a crucifixion or maybe Batman. Another one of my favorites is the Virgin Mary on a grilled cheese sandwich. So I got to meet the Virgin Mary there in Las Vegas, and it's sold on eBay for $28,500, only in America. Here it is up close, quite striking. You can really see the face. Of course, we have no idea what the Virgin Mary really looked like, but there you can see there's a little bite taken out of the grilled cheese sandwich. You're like, oh, wait a minute, there's something here. Some people said, well, maybe it's not the Virgin Mary, maybe it's Madonna. Or I thought it looked more like Jane Russell, maybe a little bit. But then I thought, who that looks like? My mom. That's my mother when she was 17 years old. How about that? In case you're wondering what us atheists see, nothing. There's nothing there. Here's the Virgin Mary on the side of a bank building in Clearwater, Florida. Richard Dawkins, the Amazing Randy, and I visited it a number of years ago before it was vandalized, tragically, because that's not cool to do that. But it's a big 2-story building, and a church bought the bank building, and they were selling candles to basically help pay their mortgage. We were there on a Good Friday, so there were a lot of people there in crutches and wheelchairs, and they erected this huge crucifix in front of it. But we just walked around the back, and it turns out Clearwater, Florida isn't. The water is not very clear. It's very mineralized, and the windows are all stained. They all have stains on them. In fact, I found one on the back that they started to wipe off, because I guess you can only have one miracle per building. You can see the sprinkler head there. There used to be a palm tree here, but they cut the palm tree out, and there's what's left of the image. So again, on the what's more likely question, is it really a miracle of Mary, or is it a miracle of Marge? Well, I'm not Catholic, but I am a Simpsons fan, so when I saw it, that looks like Marge Simpson. So let's return to our thought experiment on the plains of Africa. What's the difference between the wind and a dangerous predator? The wind is an inanimate force, and a dangerous predator is an intentional agent. And his intention is probably not good. He wants to eat you, right? So that agency idea, I call agenticity. I didn't invent the idea, just the word. The tendency to infuse patterns with meaning, intention, and agency, often invisible beings, from the top down. I think this goes a long way. In other words, we don't just find patterns, we infuse the patterns with agency. There's something behind the pattern, controlling things. Souls, spirits, ghosts, gods, demons, angels, aliens, intelligent designers, government conspiracists, and all manner of invisible agents with power and intention are believed to haunt our world and control our lives. I think this goes a long ways toward explaining animism and polytheism and monotheism and intelligent design. The intelligent designer is coming down from on high, tweaking the particles, the DNA, whatever. Aliens. The aliens are always described in these sort of godlike figures that are coming down to rescue us or warn us, like in the classic film, The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. Watch this film, not the remake with Keanu Reeves, which was fun, but different message. That was global warming. This is nuclear war. But it's a Christ allegory. Remember his name in the film? Klaatu. He's an alien coming down to visit Earth to warn us to stop sinning, basically nuclear weapons. You guys are going to nuke yourselves and cause problems, and that's not cool. You're sinners, right? So he wants to meet with the authorities, like Jesus has come. The authorities won't meet with him, so he mingles among the common people in the film. And he takes the name Mr. Carpenter, in case you don't get the analog there with Christianity. And then he sort of meets this woman, the Patricia Neal character there, who's sort of the Mary Magdalene, I think. Maybe they had a kind of a relationship, maybe they didn't. There's that tantalizing fragment from the Gospel of Thomas that says, and Jesus kissed her on her, and then it's broken right there. On her what? Because that would tell us a lot. Is it her cheek or, so. Anyway, then he's killed. Remember in the movie that the military tracks him down, they shoot him, and they put him in the morgue. And then the Patricia Neal character has to go to Gort the robot and give him this message. Gort, Klaatu, Barada, Nikto. And she has to repeat this 3 times. So the little visor goes back down, so he's not going to kill her. He goes to the jail, the morgue, burns a hole in it, takes him out, carries him back to the spaceship, puts him down on this thing, does some light stuff, and he comes alive. He's resurrected. It's a resurrection thing. And in the original script of the film, she says to Mr. Carpenter, Klaatu, this is the power of the future of science and technology. You could control life. You could bring the dead back. In the original script, he goes, yeah. And then the Breen Censorship Board in 1951 said, you can't say that to Americans. They'll freak out. So in the movie, he says something like, oh, no, only the great spirit in the sky can have control over life and death, or some such thing like that. It was so bad. And there's no scene like that in the remake. So, and conspiracy theories are a kind of, there's a pattern and there's somebody behind it pulling the strings, like the Illuminati. The government is, the economy is not this complex system that's almost impossible to predict. It's run by, these 12 people in London calling the shots and doing a crappy job of it. Or even crazier, or maybe not. No. Tied to that, I think, so let's look at some of the underlying psychology of how we come to find agency in things, is dualism. That is, we're natural-born dualists. Dualists believe that there are two substances in the universe, material and immaterial, corporeal and incorporeal, body and soul, brain and mind. Now, I'm a monist. I think there's just one substance. That is, it's just material stuff. There's no mind. The mind is just a word we use to describe what the brain does. Don't reify the word into something that feels like it's floating around in your head. You open it up, there's nothing floating around in there. There's no homunculus pulling the levers, right? We know that. But it feels like it. It feels like, there's somebody else inside me. There's a self, a soul, something like that. It feels like, when I look at you, there's almost like there's a little screen in my mind, and there's a little homunculus in there watching it, reporting back to some other part of me, telling me what's out there. But of course, if this were true, then he'd have to have a little homunculus inside him, and then the one inside him would have to have one inside him. So, that kind of reasoning doesn't get us anywhere to explain the self, free will, and that sorts of things. I'm not going to go to the free will thing here, but it helps us understand why we get and enjoy movies like Freaky Friday or All of Me. Freaky Friday, recall Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis switch bodies. Wait a minute, what happened? They switched bodies. Who switched bodies? You are your body. If you want to get a transplant, a brain transplant is the one transplant where you want to be the donor, not the recipient, because that's where you're located. You're in that organ, right? But for some reason, their soul switches bodies, or their personalities or something. And, and hilarity ensues. The middle-aged mom is now in high school, and the teenage girl's now in the corporate boardroom, and hilarity ensues. It is a funny movie. Or in the case of Steve Martin and Lily Tomlin, their soul, her soul goes into him when she dies, and he's her lawyer or something like that. And again, here's a guy with a woman's soul inside of him, and oh boy, that's all kinds of crazy conflict. But the point is, we understand it because we're dualists. Even though I don't think the evidence supports dualism, although my friend Deepak Chopra, he says he too is a monist. But he's kind of a Buddhist monist, that consciousness is the only substance, the only thing in the universe, and all this material stuff is a derivative of consciousness. Because when I ask him, well, where does Aunt Millie's mind go when her brain dies of Alzheimer's? We know what happens in Alzheimer's. The neurons die, the brain shrinks. Everything shrinks with it. Memories shrink, disappear. Personality shrinks and gets smaller. Handwriting gets smaller. Gait gets smaller. They shrink up. Everything disappears when the neurons are gone. If consciousness exists separate from brains, where is it when her brain dies? And he says it returns to where it was before she was born. Consciousness is forever. Okay, I don't accept that completely, really. I mean, I'm open-minded to this possibility, but I think it's more likely that when we lose an area of our brain, the function is gone. Without the brain, no consciousness. Interesting research by my friend Bruce Hood. I know I always say my friend this, my friend that, and I probably shouldn't do that. In fact, my friend Jack Nicholson was telling me you should not. No, just kidding. Supersense, why we believe in the unbelievable. Okay, so Bruce is the guy that's done research on essentialism. The essence, that there's a belief that we each have an essence to us. It's kind of a dualistic idea. Why is a dog and not a cat? Because it has a certain features and characteristics that makes up its essence, its dogness, humanness, catness, and so on. It's sort of a Platonic idea. And we kind of send that idea off into other people or things. That kind of essentialism is part of agenticity. So Bruce is the guy that actually asks people questions like, would you wear Hitler's jacket? Other variations on this, he actually has a box and he pulls this sweater out and he says, this is Jeffrey Dahmer's sweater, the serial killer, ate his victims. Would you like to wear it? Now almost everybody says, ugh, no. Hitler's jacket, ugh, no. Because why? Well, it's like the evil is exuded in the material and will get into me. That's what people say. Or would you wear a Mr. Rogers sweater? Oh yes, Mr. Rogers. Oh, he's so good. It feels so good. He also asked, what is the value of Brad Pitt's shirt? He actually put Brad Pitt's shirt up for sale on eBay, washed and unwashed. So it said. Which one do you think fetched the highest price? Why? Oh, the essence of Bradness. Oh, so super sexy. That's that essentialism. It's like, people are uncomfortable with organ donations, for example, because the personality of the person who had the organ will come with the, a heart transplant, kidney transplant, something like that. Wilson in the film, not Left Behind, no. So he finds this volleyball, he cuts his hand, it gets blood on it, and it kind of takes on a little bit of a face, and then in time in the film, it becomes like his companion. He's lonely, and we're a social primate species. We need companions. So he imputes into an inanimate object a person, an essence to this person. And then, of course, in the dramatic scene when he's making his getaway, the string breaks and Wilson floats away, and he's very upset about this. Organ donors. Recipients feel it's as if the essential personality characteristics of the donor came with the organ. Also related to agency is theory of mind. That is, we're self-aware of our own beliefs, desires, and intentions, as well as aware that others have beliefs, desires, and intentions. So I know that you know that I know what you're thinking right now. And you know that I'm thinking that you're thinking that, this is kind of, we play this game. All relationships are like this. Business relationship, love relationship. It's all about trying to get into somebody else's head to understand, and we're pretty good at this. And we know where it happens in the brain, the anterior paracingulate cortex. You give people, subjects, this little task, theory of mind task, while you're having their brain scanned in a scanner. You can see it lights up, here and here, the superior temporal sulci, essential for the retrieval from memory of personal experiences, such as the last time I saw a predator, it tried to eat me. So what you're doing is imputing to the pattern of the wind, or the predator, it has intention. I'm imagining what I would do if I were him trying to capture me, and therefore I better run. That's the idea behind that. Nice little experiment on this with children. When do children achieve theory of mind? Okay, they're not born with this. And so Alison Gopnik at UC Berkeley was one of the first to do experiments on this. I'll show you a little clip on that.
Well, you've probably discovered that however smart your 3-year-old is, she doesn't seem able to put herself in someone else's mental shoes, to imagine how they think and what they believe. Perhaps you thought your parenting skills were to blame. But scientists suggest that understanding other minds is a skill that may not be fully developed until a child is about 4. To learn how children's social skills evolve between about 3 and 4, researchers use something called a false belief test.
What do you think's in this box? Looks fairly obvious, doesn't it? Crayons. But let me show you. I filled it full of candles. Right? Now I close it up again. While you and I have been having this conversation, Snoopy has been down here, asleep. Doesn't know what we've talked about. But let's bring him into the conversation. Now I have another question for you. What do you think Snoopy will say if I ask him what's in this box? Crayons, obviously. What else could anybody possibly say? Well, watch this 3-year-old.
What do you think is inside this box? Let's open it up and see. Candle. Now, you can ask the child what appears to be a very simple question about that. What did you think was inside the box when you first saw it? They say, oh, I always thought that there were candles in this box. Then you can ask them about someone else. So you can ask them about Snoopy. Snoopy's been sitting here. He hasn't seen this box. He's never seen us open it up. What does Snoopy think is inside this box?
Candles.
He can say the same thing. Snoopy will think there are candles inside this box. And what that indicates is that the children's view of how minds work is very, very different from the view that you and I would have. Did you see it?
In the mind of the 3-year-old, everyone sees the world much the same way. There's no difference between what I think and believe and what everyone else, including Snoopy, thinks and believes. It is, in a sense, a naive and innocent view of the world, a kind of mental Eden. And then, about 4, comes the fall from grace.
Now, if you take the 4-year-old, quite typically, the 4-year-old will tell you that, as a matter of fact, he thought there were crayons in the box, and then he found out that there were candles in the box. You can ask him about Snoopy, and he'll say, oh no, Snoopy will think that there are crayons in this box. Wait, why do they think that?
Because it's a clear box.
Right, and that's going to make you think they're crayons. What's really in the box?
Candles.
And then you get the 5-year-olds who are just utterly blasé and think that this is such an obvious thing, it's silly even to ask the question. What that shows is that by the time children are 4 and 5, they have a view of the mind that looks much more like our view of the mind. They understand that things can be tricky and deceptive, that you can change your mind, that things aren't always the way that they seem. And that gives them a very different vision of how the mind works and how people work.
So theory of mind is a hot topic in cognitive psychology studies. I mentioned some recent studies in my talk this morning on the relationship between theory of mind and reading fiction, reading novels. It trains your brain to put yourself in somebody else's head and see the world through their eyes, because that's what you do when you read a novel. And that this may have some link to our becoming more moral, in the sense of understanding somebody else's perspective from a moral point of view, allowing us to expand our moral sphere to include more people and be less tribal. Much of the mapping of the brain came from early experiments of just actually poking around. Open brain surgeries done for whatever reason. Epilepsy is a common one. You get permission from the subjects to wake them up during the surgery and poke around and ask them what's going on. And this is Wilder Penfield was one of the first to do this, the 50s and 60s. And he found that, for example, this is the temporal lobe, the thing I mentioned above your ears here, that you can, if you stimulate that, you can stimulate déjà vu experiences, out-of-body experiences, trance and fugue states, feelings of being in the presence of others, hearing music, hearing angelic voices, intense meaningfulness, connected to a force greater than themselves, talking to God, déjà vu experiences. Thank you. See if you're paying attention. Deep temporal lobe stimulation of the amygdala and the hippocampus of the limbic system produces feelings of intense meaningfulness, depersonalization, connection with God or the cosmos. And this goes a long way to explaining near-death and out-of-body experiences. Again, we're dualists by nature. We feel like there's some other part of us that can travel in the sense of, like, you know, projecting yourself somewhere in someone else's head, or if I ask you to close your eyes and imagine yourself on a beach in Southern California where it was 90 yesterday when I left. Oh boy! And I can just sort of picture the waves, and you can put yourself there. You can decenter yourself quite easily. So we think that at near-death experiences, something like this is happening. Probably related to loss of consciousness. James Winery is a United States Air Force physician who works with pilots who accelerates in one of these G-force machines until they pass out. And a significant percentage of his pilots had these little dreamlet states where they felt like they were floating out of their body, sort of a white light at the end of the tunnel. Well, if you're depriving the brain and the retina, particularly your visual cortex, of oxygen, it's sort of shutting down this way, because the brain shuts down from the outside to the inside as you're spinning around there. It's forcing the blood in to the interior of your body, which is also what happens when you go into shock. So you don't bleed if you're cut by a predator. The body is shunted to the center of your blood, is shunted to the center of your body, center of your brain. And that's likely is what we think is going on, producing these feelings of euphoria, floating, tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel, and so forth. Stimulation of the right angular gyrus in red here of the temporal lobe in a subject in a 2003 experiment with an epileptic patient. She's now awake on the bed. They're stimulating that little area there, and she's reporting, I'm floating above the bed now. I'm way up by the ceiling. I can see you all. And then they ratchet down the electricity. Oh, I'm coming back down now. And then they poke around. Oh, my left leg, my left arm, my right arm. They map that whole area for her body. Mind you, she's just lying there. She's not moving at all. This is all in the head, in her brain. So the experiences are real. What they represent is something different. Is it out there? Is heaven really for real? There's a whole slew of these super popular best-selling books. Heaven is for real, and I've been to heaven. And no one ever writes books about, I went to hell and it was really bad. 23 minutes in hell. Oh, no. No, it's always feel-good stuff, and this guy, Eben Alexander, is a very popular author. He wrote this book, Proof of Heaven. He had a form of virus-induced encephalitis. His brain expanded, and they put it into an induced coma so they could and then do some medical procedures to release the pressure on his brain. And while he was in this induced coma, he had this fantastic experience in which he went to heaven, and he was floating on the wings of a butterfly, and the colors were incredibly vibrant, and the sounds were incredibly rich, and he goes on like this. So I met him, and I've been on a couple TV shows with him, and so I got to know him in the green room. I firmly believe he had a real experience. I don't think he just made it up. But he's a neurosurgeon, so he knows more about the brain than I do. And it's like, well, you know about this stuff that I've been rifling through here. Yes. But mine was different. It's like, I know, everybody's is slightly different, but why would you think yours is really going somewhere else and everybody else is, because, if you read Oliver Sacks's books, every one of them, every chapter is a patient that has some neurological disorder associated with their brain. And they have these fantastic, the story of, the title of one of them, the man who thought his wife was a hat, or hat rack, or whatever it was, what? Yeah, people will have weird experiences when they have these, different neurological disorders. Or if you read Sam Harris's first chapter of his book, Waking Up, about his experience taking drugs, it sounds just like Eben Alexander's trip. Or if you read Oliver Sacks's autobiography about his experience in taking LSD in the 60s, it sounds just like, the colors were incredible, and I had felt this intense feeling of deep love, just unmitigated love, and it's okay. But what's the difference again? Sagan's dragon. What's the difference between the drug-induced one but yours is real? Okay, that's the problem. What's more likely that these things represent, like alien abductions? We know what's going on when people have these experiences. Is it human psychology or not? So sleep paralysis is the explanation we think for these experiences that people have. Several centuries ago, the English referred to nighttime sensations of chest pressure from witches or other supernatural beings as the mare from the Anglo-Saxon maren to crush. So a nightmare was a crusher who comes in the night. Okay, so here's what's going on. People, about 1 to 3% of the population has unusual sleep disorders. They're not even disorders, they're just anomalous experiences. And some of them have what's called sleep paralysis. So you wake up in your dream, you're still actually dreaming, you're still asleep, but you wake up in the dream and you feel like you should get up and move, but you can't. Well, it's because you're super relaxed, prone, supine position, and the mattress is soft, so you kind of feel like you're floating. But you can't move, so you feel paralyzed, and often it feels like somebody's sitting on your chest. So people that purport this today, they don't call them incubi and succubi, demons. They call them aliens. So your culture tells you what to call it, what words to use when you write the story about what happened to you. And so that's where this stuff comes from. So we have real experiences that are psychological in nature. Culture tells us how to talk about them and what words to use. Another one of these is the sense-presence effect. I have a feeling there's somebody else in the room with me right now. Now, in my case, that would be rather accurate. But I'm talking about when you're alone, particularly, late at night in your bedroom, it feels like someone else is here. Or alpinists often report this feeling when they're in their tents. People that climb Everest, K2, the big alpine climbers, they spend a lot of time by themselves in their tents, waiting out weather and things like that. And they'll often report, I felt like there's somebody in here with me. This guy, Joe Simpson, wrote a book about his climbing experiences called Touching the Void, and he describes one of these. The voice was clean and sharp and commanding. It was always right, and I listened to it when it spoke and acted on its decisions. They have to talk about, they invoke these invisible sense entities when they're in danger, particularly feeling anxious, like the supernatural, superstitious thing. Like they can't decide, should I go now or later? And this little voice tells them, no, you should do this. Okay. So it's like a companion to help you. The other mind rambled out a disconnected series of images and memories and hopes, which I attended to in a daydream state as I set about obeying the orders of the voice. I've read some of the narratives from the Iditarod dog sled mushers, and they report fantastic hallucinations. Now, this is like days, weeks. They're out there by themselves on these open trails. There's a lot of whiteout. And it's just you and your dogs. And so these guys report having, there was an orchestra on the side of the trail. It was fantastic. And there was another guy sitting right on my sled. I said, get off my sled. He was talking to me, and there's nobody there, or solo sailors. So it's not just high altitude. You know, the Iditarod sledders, they're not at high altitude. Solo sailors report this. Charles Lindbergh reports in his famous flight. This is only, 36 hours? The fuselage behind me becomes filled with ghostly presences, vaguely outlined forms, transparent, moving, riding weightless with me in the plane. I feel no surprise that they're coming. There's no suddenness to their appearance. Lindbergh even heard voices that spoke with authority and clearness, yet after the flight he reported, I can't remember a single word that they said. What were these phantom beings doing there? They were there conversing and advising on my flight, discussing problems with my navigation, reassuring me, giving me messages of importance, unattainable in ordinary life, right? So I think this goes a long way to explaining what religion does, what the belief in God or gods does for us. You know, it's a companion, somebody to reassure us in our darkest moments that we all have. You're not alone. Somebody out there loves you, and that feels good. Absolutely. I've had some of my own experiences with this in a race that I and 3 other guys founded in 1982 called the Race Across America. It's a 3,000-mile nonstop transcontinental race that goes from coast to coast, and everybody rides by themselves. You're not allowed to draft other cyclists, and you have a support crew with you. And in 1983, I thought I did it in 82, finished third, broke the transcontinental record, as did the 2 guys in front of me, unfortunately. So in 83, I thought, I'm going to go as far as I can with no sleep. I'm going to see if I can go LA to New York without any sleep at all. And I found this guy who did 11 days without sleep at UCLA in the 70s playing video games or whatever, Pong and those sorts of things. And I thought, I can do it. I couldn't do it. I made it to Hagler, Nebraska, 1,283 miles from the Santa Monica Pier. It took 83 hours to get there. And at that point, I was having a fantastic hallucination. It was great. I was abducted by aliens. And so basically, I'm just sort of riding along 3 in the morning. That's when the best hallucinations happen. By the way, this is all drug-free and legal. All you got to do is just stay up for several days, and it's fantastic. And so all of a sudden, this spaceship came over my left shoulder here and stopped me on the side of the road, abducted me into the spacecraft. I lost 90 minutes of time, the missing time, like on X-Files. Well, it's just my support crew in the motorhome saying, Shermer, you're riding too slow. Get in and take a nap. And so I took a 90-minute sleep break and boom, back out on the road. And the next day, this race was covered by ABC Wide World of Sports. The camera crew comes up to me as I crossed the Mississippi River. They were waiting there for me, and they asked me how it went, and I told them about this story. Here's that clip from that. I should say, parenthetically, this was a long time ago, so I look rather different. We were younger back then.
It was midnight, 6.5 hours after Lana Walden's crossing, when Michael Shermer reached the Mississippi. What Diana and I hadn't known when we spoke of a close race earlier was that Shermer was slowing down. As he told Eric Ryder there on the bridge, he was wasting.
Feel pretty mentally alert. That's how I get at the bridge, Eric, things like psychotic things. But thinking my crew was an alien from another planet trying to capture me. Sounds ridiculous, but what I thought.
Another way to do this, you go to Michael Persinger's lab at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Canada, and put on his God helmet, as he calls it, the God helmet. It's a motorcycle helmet with solenoids on the side. He bombards your temporal lobes with magnetic fields, and it's supposed to stimulate you to have. So I went and did this, and I had kind of an out-of-body experience. Maybe, I was pretty skeptical by the time I went to do this. So I think it's like hypnosis. It's like trying to fall asleep when you're trying to fall asleep. Sitting there, fall asleep, you can't do it. You got to think about something else. Sheep. In this case, but he's had people that have had fantastic experiences with this, in which they think they're going to heaven or having out of body, seeing the devils and so forth. In other words, all belief is mediated by the brain, and the mind is just a word for what the brain does. And so I'm going to put all this together into a final video clip here to show you, and we'll end there and then take your questions. So I've been talking about priming effects. I've been talking about how we confirm our beliefs. This is called the confirmation bias. And then what happens when our expectations are violated and what a surprise it is. So this is kind of a little faux video commercial here that illustrates these effects.
This is the venue they chose for their fake auditions for an advert for lip balm.
We're hoping that we can use part of this in a national commercial, right? And this is a test on some lip balms that we have over here. And these are our models who are going to help us, Roger and Matt. And we have our own lip balm, and we have a leading brand. Would you have any problem kissing our models to test? I think that was fine. So this is a blind test. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put a blindfold on. Okay, now can you see anything? Pull it so you can't even see down. It's completely blind now, right? Okay. Now what I'm going to be looking for in this test is the texture, and maybe if you can discern any flavor or not. Have you ever done a kissing test before? Okay, now I'm going to ask you to pucker up big and lean in just a little bit, okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. You've been a great audience. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.